New Zealand Tech Podcast, the voice of the tech community. Proudly supported by Umbrella Connect.
Greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain. Today, very pleased to have Bill Bennett joining me for the show. How are you, Bill?
I'm good, Paul.
Fantastic. Great to catch up. It's been a little while between...
About 6 weeks, I think, yeah.
Yeah. What's your role within this great wide world of tech and journalism for those who don't know you?
Well, I'm a business and technology journalist. Been doing that for longer than most people listening have been alive, I think. I still do some of that. Still do some tech writing. Still do some technology stuff and so on. But these days, I get dragged into other roles as well. But that's still my main tag. That's what I would describe myself as.
Great. Well, it's good to get a chance to jump in, delve into some of the tech issues and interesting topics of the day. We have this year been doing a lot of episodes that are focused on startups and companies, but I really enjoy it when we get a chance to sit down and delve into what's going on and get to hear some opinions.
I like the business side once the companies are going.
Yeah. So all of these things are interesting, but I want to delve into some New Zealand things. So we've had some issues in MIQ with people getting places. So I want to talk about that. Is technology sort of helping or hindering that? A little bit about the Hawaii-Iki cable, which is one of our very important links for New Zealand to the rest of the world, but that's been sold offshore. Is that good, bad? Something we should be worried about? Vocus, one of the show partners, they've been acquired on a Australia New Zealand basis, but there's potentially some changes afoot there. And then on a global perspective, there's a whole bunch of things that we'll try and get across. Things happening in the autonomous car area, that slowly developing area. Supply chain issues. Intel have had some very big announcements out around their future. And then we've got global chip shortages and the cybersecurity supply chain issues related to Kaseya. So let's jump in, first of all, on these online booking challenges that people have been having. And I had somebody contact me the other day and they said, Paul, I've booked some tickets overseas. I've got family member to that I need to see. We haven't seen them for a long period of time, so I booked these tickets. Now how do I make sure I can get back into the country?
Wow.
And whether that's rightly or wrongly the way to book your tickets, is the technology right? And what do you think we should be doing, Bill?
Well, the thing is first of all, right, you can't get into New Zealand without buying a plane ticket. So there's no reason why we couldn't have integrated this into booking plane tickets and have done with it that way. And that would have, certainly made the problem a bit easier.
Sounds like a really good suggestion. So what you're thinking is that for an airline to be allowed to sell a ticket,
it has to have a place.
That goes with a place.
Yeah.
You buy your ticket, and your ticket is your way in because they've only made the seat available after the government issuing it. Now I don't know how easy that is behind the scenes. But to you and I, that sounds pretty
exactly.
simple for everyone.
And the airlines can interface with the booking system.
All right, let's do that. How do we get it done, Bill?
I don't know. I think that's probably a political issue. But the thing is booking systems, online booking systems, are all a bit crook anyway. I mean, I think I was talking earlier about how if you try and buy concert tickets, you see there's a band coming to Auckland, you really want to see them, and you say that tickets are going on sale at 9 o'clock on Monday morning, and at 9 o'clock at Monday morning you log on and the site's down, you can't get anywhere. 3 minutes past 9, all the tickets are sold. Right, that's not humans buying tickets off a website. There's something going on there, and that's pretty much what's happening here. Is there are bots and all kinds of things attacking the actual system that's been set up, and of course we know that there are rat bags who are making a living off of hacking it in effect and
grabbing
places.
For, people that have paid them to put them there.
Exactly, and then they're charging it and they're making money out of that, and that's
the Prime Minister tells us that's categorically not happening. Was kind of the interview I saw. So I mean, but I guess that's sort of politics sometimes, isn't it? You maybe don't necessarily want to say that something could be happening. It's a little bit like last year with the masks. We were told for weeks on end, no, don't wear a mask. No, nobody should be wearing a mask, because there weren't enough masks to go around, and that would have created havoc in society. And then that but
the other thing is that the politicians are only as good as their advisors as well, and they can be getting poor advice. I actually don't think it is that this is a political problem, because I can't imagine that another political leadership wouldn't face exactly the same problems. I mean, they all
want a great result.
Well,
right?
look. I mean, can you remember what happened with the teachers' pay system when that was privatised? That was done by the previous government. Yeah. It's not about the politicians. It's about governments and systems and things, and there's always a bit of a mismatch somewhere in the mix.
Well, it takes time to get things done, right?
Yeah,
and look, we saw that with the NZ COVID Tracer app. It came out. It wasn't quite right to start with, but it got a lot better, and it got a lot better quite quickly. But no one uses it now is the problem.
Nothing that has been made by Google or Microsoft or Oracle or SAP has ever worked first time. It just doesn't. You have to wait till you're on version 3.1. Yeah, so when we get to MIQ bookings 3.1, it'll work.
Then we'll be there. There'll be lottery system. There'll be this and that. Or it'll be linked back to.
But I do think it needs fixing. I mean,
it's the tickets. Yeah,
I think it does need attention and fixing now. And I think that the thinking behind having that booking system was probably, how are we going to solve this? What can we do? These are our options. And they did something.
And look, they didn't have much time, right?
No.
You have to do something. You can't just leave it free for all and for people to turn up in the country.
I think Gmail was in beta for 10 years. You can't do that when you've got a pandemic to deal with. So look, I think it was a very quick fix. It was quick and dirty, and it turns out it was a bit too dirty. And so we need to think again. That's what I reckon. Should pull it apart, and it would probably be better to, as I say, get the airlines involved and do it that way. But if you're not going to do that, then at least allow everyone who wants to come back to get onto a list, and there's a wait list or whatever, and pull the numbers out by lottery or whatever, but do something so that people are not so that what you don't want it to be whoever pays the most gets in. And that's what it looks like it could be at the moment.
Yeah, and maybe that's what would happen if it was linked back to the airline tickets. Who knows? Anyway,
the Wallabies didn't have any trouble.
Yeah. Wow. Now the Hawaii Eki cable, with this was really exciting. We've the last few years in terms of internet connectivity to New Zealand, undersea, fibre optic cables. We're streets ahead of where we were just 4 or 5 years ago. When did our first one come in to augment the Southern Cross cable, which is now around 20,
it's about 5 years ago,
21, 22 years old now.
Well, the first one was the Tasman Global Access, the one which
was the first of the new ones, right?
Yeah, the new one, which just goes across to Sydney, and then there was this one, and of course Southern Cross is building a new cable as well at the moment. So there's plenty of activity. But here's the thing, right? Southern Cross is no longer majority owned by New Zealand companies.
40% from Spark, isn't it?
I mean, Spark still has it, but Spark's not. Spark's probably a certain percentage of Spark is held overseas as well, and Southern Cross, so Southern Cross is not necessarily completely owned by New Zealand interests. Hawaii will not be owned by New Zealand interests, but as this sale goes through, I don't think it's had regulatory approval yet, but I can't see that being denied.
Yeah, I'm curious how that works, and we're probably not going to figure this out today, but how the regulatory framework works for an undersea cable that links up New Zealand, Australia, a bunch of Pacific islands.
Well, you can't argue that it's not strategic,
and
can
the
you?
US, right? It's really important, but it's really important to all of those countries.
Yeah.
So, how do you decide what's an appropriate ownership? Now, going to Singaporean ownership, which sounds okay, but could it get on sold to someone else? I remember when we were, the I think it was a Hawaii cable actually, in terms of potential investors, and
no, you're thinking of Pacific Fibre.
Ah, the Pacific Fibre one.
Yeah,
you're right. You're right.
And the Chinese wanted to invest, and that and the Americans
got pushed back, right?
Well, the Americans would have pulled the plug on the project.
They wouldn't have let it land.
Yeah.
But now it's landed. Could a cable end up in the hands of
someone somewhere could be playing three-dimensional chess with this sort of strategically, but I don't think so. I think the problem is more that we don't have that control, and we don't really know very much about this Singaporean company that's bought it either. They're not a telco. They're not a telecommunications business. They're a construction company, which is curious, because around the rest of the world, what's been happening with I don't know. Submarine cables is a whole world of its own. But what's actually been going on in submarine cables globally in the last 3 or 4 years is the likes of Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and so on have been buying up and building their own cables.
Yep, they want to make sure everything's going to work well for their businesses.
Exactly.
They can't afford to put them at risk.
Absolutely, and they've been buying huge, large shares in the remaining ones around the world, and they're booking out like large amounts of space on cables and so on, because they want to prioritise their traffic going around the place. Amazon are in this as well, so. I guess that there's obviously the Singaporean company has a plan in place for why it would want such a cable. You've got to remember this cable doesn't go anywhere near Singapore. It goes from here across to America. Singapore's the other way.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the news articles I read on it, it says being bought by BW Group, but then it clarifies it's BW Group's subsidiary called BW Digital.
Yeah.
So of course you go away and you do it, and you Google BW Digital, and all the top story the top stories are to do with the news thing, and then your first entry is bwdigital.io, which is a company that talks about facial recognition and other digital bits and pieces, software development. Mexico and the US, so clearly not the same entity. So they don't appear to have a breakdown. I guess it's a holding company that holds a number of assets for the parent company.
Yeah, and I very briefly tried to figure out who owns this company, and I haven't got there yet. I'll need some time to dig around to find that out. But we could find out that it's ultimately owned by someone else, completely different.
They control 400 ships, ICRNZ reporting. So, but the area of who maintains these cables is actually a very specialist area. So I wouldn't imagine there's going to be any crossover there. So quite a change. But it would be nice to understand just how that plays out, and how they decide whether these sort of things get the big tick.
And the other thing you just want to watch is whether the prices go up, because we could be we're not going to be held to ransom because there's another cable, but it could be a play just to squeeze us on price.
Let's hope not, Bill. Let's hope not. We like having our unlimited internet in New Zealand now that we've most of us have it, and for so long we didn't. And
we're kind of used to it, aren't we?
Yeah, but you look to the US, and there you've got scenarios where folks that used to have unlimited and uncapped internet don't necessarily have it in all cases. So.
I spent a lot of time recently on Zoom calls with people in Australia, and I'm just going to get away from the subject a bit here, but my word, they have some bloody awful broadband connectivity coming out of Australia.
Yes, that's definitely another rabbit hole. but we'll leave the Australians to their internet. Some of them have good internet, and it's getting better. Now, Vocus
Talking
Group
of Australians.
has sold, Australian based company. What do you know about that? Because you follow these things a bit more deeply than me. I know you had a lot on your plate. But,
look, I can't remember. I can't remember. I was well on top of that. But
3.5 billion Australian
I know for a long time.
dollar sale.
It was Australian Gas and Light were after them for a while as well, but that fell through. I mean, the thing is this was about the fourth time that someone had actually got to the point of buying, and the previous three fell over at that stage when they'd made the offers and so on. This time has gone through. The real issue is what's going to happen here. I think is that the talk is that the local business has been up for sale for some time now. It was always on the agenda with the previous focus to sell off the New Zealand business, but that kept getting put aside because they had bigger fish to fry, which was actually selling the entire business. But now it looks very much as though the focus is going to come back on selling Vocus in New Zealand. And that's going to be interesting because we're already been told that there's an IPO coming for 2 Degrees as well.
Yeah, so both of them could...
now, 3 years ago, you'd think, telco IPO, that would be really worth thinking about in terms of investing your own money. Now we've got Starlink and other things going on. I'm just thinking the landscape's changing quite fast. It's actually, it's very fast moving. What's happening? I mean, what we haven't seen in New Zealand, we haven't seen the UFB project and separating Chorus and Telecom happened. What about 12 years ago now? That was first pushed by the key government 12 years ago. Yep. Since then, the market share of the big players hasn't really changed very much in the market. And I think we're about to go into a phase now where we will see some change there. We possibly see some kind of consolidation. And we have a point where we got 4 big players in the market, which is Spark, Vodafone, 2 Degrees, and Vocus. They're the 4 big ones.
Could you imagine Vocus and 2 Degrees?
That's the most likely. I don't think either Vodafone or Spark would be allowed to buy either of those companies. And it's clear that Chorus isn't allowed to buy anything because that's been discussed before. It wasn't possible. So that's how consolidation could work. The other thing is that Trustpower's been in play recently, and they sold off their customer business too. And Trustpower was owned by Infratil, which is the ultimate owner of Vodafone. And I always thought that was that could have become some kind of consolidation of those businesses there. So, but whatever's going on, I think we're going to see some gyrations in the shape of our market over the coming year.
Yeah. Oh well, interesting times ahead. Now, looking internationally, we had this big cybersecurity incident where Kaseya were hit with this supply chain attack. So effectively, their software, which sits on a lot of computers around New Zealand and around the world, it sits on devices there to actually help keep them secure, to maintain them and support them. We had that similar issue last year with the other software vendor whose name's popped out of my head.
Well, I was going to say it's very meta because the thing about Kaseya is that their customers are managed software providers and managed service providers so on. Yeah. So it's a very sort of meta problem, if you like. It's they've gone right up the food chain with that.
But the good news is that for those who were maybe stuck from that incident, that Kaseya now have been distributing a tool to unencrypt data. We are a few weeks down the track. interesting piece that wasn't initially revealed is that Kaseya are saying they didn't pay.
Yeah.
Well, the headline in Bloomberg says Kaseya says it didn't pay a ransom to hackers, and exactly what what that means behind the scene. And they say, look, not directly or indirectly, but yeah, it's a little bit hard to know the full details. And
do you believe them, Paul?
Ooh, I'm not going to make a call on that one, Bill. But certainly, the speculation, some of the speculation behind the scenes was, yes, a payment's been made, directly seemed the most likely.
Yeah.
The thing is with ransomware, if a payment is not made, then you expect data to get leaked. That's the sort of the normal scenario. But my impression, and it's I haven't been following this one closely the last few weeks, but my recollection was that this all moved quite quickly, and I don't recall that there was actually data sort of siphoned out of organisations.
Oh.
Like with the Waikato DHB, data was siphoned out, and then it became clear of a ransomware attack. They said, we're not paying the money, and it was after that point that the confidential data was leaked, and that's kind of a common scenario. So it's.
I think what's going to happen is that we're going to have to deal with ransomware on like a world level. We're going to need some kind of task force globally to deal with it, because it's becoming a serious problem. But there's
like the UN.
Well,
no decisions ever get made.
Well, no. I don't know about the UN, but something. It's a global problem,
it is,
and the problem is that there's still a suspicion that some nation states are involved in it.
When you've got sort of certain state actors that aren't necessarily behaving themselves. The whole thing is very challenging. I don't imagine we're going to have probably a perfect fix. Certainly not anytime soon. If ever, but we will see.
Well, the other thing is the lesson is just to be even more paranoid about your data than you have been. And I'm afraid you're right. There's certainly an aspect there, and I think now when people are considering whether they should have cyber insurance compared to 2 or 3 years ago when it was unusual for data to get leaked. Now you've got that extra thing to consider, and that's really what your insurance covers you for. Is it dramatically reduces the chance, if you're able to make a payout, of stopping the data that getting leaked. Now, there's no guarantees. We all know that, right? You're paying a ransom. There's good luck, but there's an aspect where these entities, they want to keep getting paid. So there's a level to which they behave themselves in their criminal activities. And I also think there's just no excuse for not going to every level that you can to protect yourself against this now. You can't claim you don't know about it. It's an issue. Yeah,
that's an interesting one, because there are endless levels to which you can go to, and I think I was looking at and talking to a few folks around some of the aspects of what happened with the Waikato DHB, and you've got challenges with outdated technology. You've got challenges with how much budget's available. I saw the other day it looked like they were advertising for their first chief information security officer. There's a lot of things that take time and they take money and resources.
Skilled people to handle those jobs either. That's the other side. That's the other side of it. But we were talking about the irony of this is that it hit managed service providers, and managed security service providers is a fast growing sector. So look, I think the thing is we're just going to have to spend more and more time on security, and I think we're going to have to deal with this. It's criminal. I mean, there was talk in the US about actually regarding it as an act of war if a foreign state actor is involved in a ransomware attack, if it can be proved. I think that's probably going a bit far, but it certainly seems that as an issue, it's getting out of hand.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure actually about that Chief Information Security Officer role for Waikato DHB. I'm pretty sure that was a new role, but if I'm wrong, apologies on that one. So I think we could probably do a whole episode sort of delving into these supply chain issues and Kaseya situation and other ones, but it does change how we think about these things, and as you say, there is a real need to step up, and it's in lots and lots of different areas, and we can't sort of sit still on this stuff. We have to keep the movement going. Now, I wanted to jump on it to the global chip shortage that's really impacting a lot. Billions of dollars worth of impact on the auto industry in terms of vehicles that just can't be delivered. Some of them are partly manufactured, but without chips can't be completed. I saw one of the auto industry bosses said that it takes 18 months to re-engineer a vehicle to use a different chip, and the comment was due to the sophistication of the technology. So this was sort of one of the quotes that the media have been carrying. Daimler and Mercedes-Benz have built vehicles without the chips, and so they've basically got to put them aside until the silicon arrives. But there was a headline that was fascinating for Tesla, which says they have rewritten their own software to work around the chip shortage. So they were able to substitute and swap out chips, and they had to rewrite their firmware to do so. And they've just done that on the fly. So it sort of shows what we've talked about before. The sort of difference between Tesla's approach, which is trying to do as much as they possibly can, in-house, and then the traditional automakers that I think are trying to get onto the same page. But it's a big job for them to emulate the Tesla approach in a way. What do you think?
It's not the only challenge they face at the moment, because the big challenge is that the idea that at some point we're going to stop making internal combustion engines. And that's whatever date that happens, that's going to affect the resale market, and that's going to affect the new market, and so on. And it has implications there. The other part of it is that I worry about the fact that they all seem to need to use custom chips for everything, whereas a smarter approach might have been to go for more generic processors, and maybe forego some of the nuances of having custom-made chips. Custom-made chips is a very expensive and difficult route to go down, perhaps. I mean, I'm no expert on how to integrate technology, this kind of technology into a car. But it just strikes me that they've attempted to build cathedrals, and they should be building, like local dairies, if you like. And I think that's part of the problem, is that the car industry thinks in a completely different way. I mean, a few years ago, I was hearing that it takes something like 4 years from a car to get from the drawing board out onto the street.
And it used to take a lot longer. Yeah. I remember a visit with Ford, might have been one of the ones in Australia, and they're running through, because the thing I would always challenge them with when they would invite me to an event or ask questions about, they'd be showing off some new in-dash, entertainment technology and apps and different things. And, I remember seeing it in the US. And I said, this is fantastic. When do we get that in New Zealand? oh, well, by the time that's going to be a couple of years. And what about upgrading what's in your existing car? Oh no, we wouldn't do that. You buy the new car and you get the new technology.
Yeah.
And here we are, seeing Tesla, who continuous software updates. I got a new entertainment thing last week. And if you've got an old car that's a few years old, in a lot of cases they will let you, and they're doing this in New Zealand right now. You can swap out the entertainment system. Yeah. You can swap out the chips. And they're a reasonable upgrades.
That's because Tesla views the car market more like the electronics market, more like the digital electronics market. That's their worldview. Then it's one of the reasons why the company's been so successful. It's also one of the reasons why the company, people really don't know if it's going to be successful long term. It might not, because we don't know that stuff. They're actually moving into whole new areas of how to go about this. And it could be that the old guys had it right all along. I don't think so, by the way. But it just doesn't mean that the new guys have got it necessarily heading in the right direction.
Yeah. Tesla certainly got their challenges in scaling up and so on.
But look, if you were a global scale manufacturer of laptops, right? Your HP, and you go to Foxconn or whatever to get your laptops made, right? You have options all the way through, so that if things don't turn up in your supply chain, we don't get the right hard drives, we don't get the right this, we don't get the right that, we can still build laptops.
Yep, you've got other products.
That's how it works in the electronics business.
Yeah.
Car industry doesn't think that way. It's not so long ago. Within our lifetimes, these things were entirely vertically integrated to a ridiculous degree. And they still don't sort of modularize and enough. But anyway, I think the car industry is in kind of dire straits anyway, full stop. And I think this is like, getting a sickness when there's actually an underlying disease.
Well, my view for a while is that Tesla have, and if you were to go by the share price, you would think this had already happened. Tesla have that opportunity to be, the new Toyota. Right, the company that everyone goes to buy their car. The prices will come down. They'll become accessible. When the market is, primarily or only selling electric vehicles, and you've got a choice between a Tesla and all the traditional companies. Now, people are still making these decisions today to buy other cars. I had a friend come in here who's formerly in the tech sector. And he said, I've got the Audi, I can't remember what it was, but, the Audi electric vehicle on order. He says, I may never get it because of, all their issues with getting the parts. I said, why are you buying an old school car that by the moment you get it, its technology's going to be out of date, rather than buying a Tesla? And it's twice the price. There are good reasons why people make these decisions, but the way I view it, I think it doesn't line up with my thinking. Put it that way. But so I think Tesla have that opportunity. We'll see how it plays out.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that they're the new Toyota, because Toyota is probably the company which is most out of touch at the moment with what's going on, and
they're okay with the hybrids, but they don't have any full.
But here's the reason why they're out of touch, right? It's because they were so hugely successful in the last era, and we've seen this happen in tech. You're really successful in the last era. IBM was successful in the last 3 or 4 eras, really, but they didn't make it into. They still exist, but they haven't been successful in the cloud era because they're still fighting the last war. And I think Toyota is still fighting the last war because that worked for them. That worked for them for so long, and everything in that business is geared up for that. I think the real issue is there are going to be some fresh startups in the vehicle sector. That could turn it on its head even more, and I think that
Rivians are being tested in New Zealand at the moment in the South Island.
Who is?
The Rivian, which is the the Utes and four-wheel drive vehicles, and I mean they've got Amazon behind them and Ford behind them. I think they just announced another 2.5 billion.
Do you know something? The fact that they've got Amazon and Ford behind them worries me because I think that's back to they're still fighting the old wars.
Right.
And that was why Tesla.
Someone's got to fund them, I suppose.
That's why Tesla did what it did. Is because as a company it decided it wasn't going to fight the old wars, and I think that's where the new car or the new vehicle companies are going to come from. Is they're going to come from left field. I bet you they don't come from the US. I bet you they don't.
Well, China is certainly, you need to be watching what's happening in China with BYD and so on, and because they've got such a big domestic market, that sort of that pays for their research and development. And of course, I mean, we look at the Chinese cars coming into the New Zealand market, putting Tesla aside for a minute, because all the Teslas coming into New Zealand are made in China now. But although their prices dropped with the subsidies by about 25% on the Model 3, but the other ones, they're dramatically cheaper than the other options in the market, and you got to imagine they're not complete rubbish.
Yeah, I think so, and I also think that this is a market where, for a long time, Japan's been a bit out of the picture, but I think Japan could probably shine in this market too. I don't know if they got their research right, though.
Well, we will see how that plays out. Now, I saw some news coverage of Ford together with Argo AI working to deploy a sort of autonomous vehicle fleet with Lyft in the US, and of course, Lyft is the primary rival to Uber in the US market, and looks like they're going to slowly roll out. They'll end up, I'm not sure the exact timeline, but 1,000 robo taxis in the next few years ahead into the US market, starting with Miami. This year, and then Austin, Texas next year. So we're still seeing this movement with these robo taxis.
I'm going to come back to that point in a moment, but I want to ask you something before we get to that. What level of autonomy are we talking about?
Well, that's always the million dollar question. To start with, they're going to have somebody sitting in the driver's seat. And I guess there's that, how do you get from, where we are now to fully autonomous? And we've of course seen that go wrong, but we see things go wrong with drivers and driver's seats as it is today.
But it's like that. It's like an asymptotic curve where you never actually hit the goal of fully autonomous. I think that's been the problem. I mean, and the thing is, see what you were just saying about Lyft doing this and Ford. Do you know it's been 5 years that we've had these kind of stories about very soon we're going to have autonomous
Absolutely,
cars.
it just keeps going, doesn't
it? And I've told this story on the podcast before, right? In 1982, I was told in 2 years' time, no one will use a keyboard. You will just talk to your computer. It took 30 years. But in 1982, it looked like it was just around the corner. It looked like we were almost at that point. And in fact, it took 3 or 4 revolutions in technology for it to become even possible. We needed scads more storage, and you actually didn't get proper understanding of human speech until devices could report back to base.
And it's still pretty stuffed in many ways.
Yeah, it's still not brilliant. Yeah.
Realistically, the number of issues and errors and so on.
And we're in exactly that place with the car industry. And we were talking a bit earlier about being futurists and so on. And I think the problem with and this is not a criticism of you, Paul. This is my criticism in general. Right? The problem is that you can become so in love with the future that you become blind to what's actually immediately in front of you rather than what's out there a few years out. And it doesn't happen evenly. And you can't draw a straight line projection from here to there. It's going to be bumpy and so on. And
agreed.
And the car industry the whole idea of autonomous cars. I think the first time I wrote a magazine feature on autonomous cars was about 7 years ago. And we're still not much closer than we were 7 years ago. And in fact, a lot of the research projects have been wound down and the money's come out of the sector. That doesn't mean to say we won't get there, but it probably requires a shift that we can't, when I say we, I mean all of us can't see today, in the same way that machine translation of, understanding human speech actually required very good communications links so that things could go back, so that devices that were doing the understanding could report back to base and say, "Here, I've just heard this. What does this mean?" And that, yet no one in 1982 ever thought that was necessary. They thought that it would be able to be done locally. And I think it's the same thing with cars. I think there's a missing piece of the jigsaw, and it's probably down the back of the sofa, and it's and that when we found that piece of the jigsaw, it'll all snap into place. But no one knows what that piece is even.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's something I think Elon Musk recently had, admitted, because they delayed this launch of they call it their FSD Beta 9, which was sort of, opening up this update to a bigger group of people in the US, which, in a lot of cases can drive somebody from A to B with without intervention necessarily. But he admitted, like, this stuff's a lot harder than I thought, right? And that's the reality. But I do think it is important that we are always sort of looking out, as you can't close your eyes to the to the here and now, but we have to look out, and some of those things will happen a lot further out than we think. Some of them will happen sooner. Some of them we've got to get out and create them, and I think, those opportunities are there. And
I think the other part of that is that some sectors of society, you've seen we've seen what happens with vaccinations and pandemics and so on. That certain sectors of society are not thinking in the same place as other.
Some
sectors
people love it. Some people just aren't interested. Right?
Yeah, and I think the same thing will apply. I think the same thing applies to aspects of AI, and I think the same thing applies to aspects of autonomous vehicles. And it's quite possible that 2 years from now you'll see Spanish farmers blockading streets because there's autonomous vehicles running around. You know what I'm saying? Society has to move as well as the technology, and I think society isn't quite ready for this yet. I can't put my finger on it, but I think even if tomorrow Tesla had all the right bits in place, just wait till the first kid gets run over by an autonomous car, and it's all bets are off. So it's not just about the technology; it's also about getting society. So you've got to get more ducks in a row than just chips. Yeah.
Yep. Now, lastly, I wanted to delve into Intel. Now, most of us for a long time have relied on Intel technology in our primary computers, right? That's how the world's been. But what changed? I don't know how many years we're looking back to where it started becoming evident, but
iPhone, I think.
I mean, certainly, in the last 15 years or so, the ARM, based chips really started changing the world, and Intel, tried to get their chips into mobile phones, into tablets, and so on. They tried to, bring down the power usage, but as we've seen with using the new iPad Pro. I'm using an Intel MacBook Pro at the moment, but regularly been using the
I've got the M1,
M1 based device and reviewing that. And we've got this world that's changing. Microsoft are trying to change to ARM based within for their some of their Surface products and so on. The world is going through this big change, but we have the big headline today, or few headlines actually around Intel really getting back into a dominant position. Mid-2020s, 2025, 4 nanometer, 3 nanometer, and then fractions of a nanometer style chip. And, this is how we've measured the technology in terms of how small we can shrink down the circuits, isn't it?
If I was the CEO of Intel, I'd be saying all that. I wouldn't know if I could do it, but I'd be saying all of that. And I
guess it depends how he's rewarded, which is often linked back to share price and profitability, and all these things help, don't they?
He'll probably be gone. He'll probably be out of the job by the time the actual results of this is known. But that sort of level of cynicism aside, I think the problem is that if you go back to around about the time the iPhone was introduced. Both Intel and Microsoft were actually they've been in the. We were talking about this earlier. How they've been at the top of it for so long, and it was so easy to make money that they thought everything they were doing was right, and it didn't occur to them. It was even more apparent with BlackBerry. I mean, before the iPhone, BlackBerry just looked to be on top of the world, and it collapsed within a matter of 4 or 5 years. It was gone. Intel and Microsoft had so much more momentum, and something happened at Microsoft where they, basically booted Baumer out and got Nadella in, and he fixed it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Intel didn't fix it, and the thing was that Intel was still fighting. The generals of Intel were still fighting the last war at the time when they shouldn't have been, and they were getting further and further behind. And all this time, the chip fab plants in East Asia were gearing up. The real problem we have today actually is so much of it is dependent on Taiwan, and Taiwan is not 100% safe place to live right now. So there's a huge problem there. But what's interesting is that if you look at what Intel's strategy is now, Intel's trying to become like the Taiwanese microcomputer semiconductor company. They're actually becoming a chip fab, and they're becoming a fab plant for Amazon and so on.
Well, there is something to be said for the timing, right? Because there aren't enough plants at the moment, so someone's got to jump in and do it. Will we get the scenario? And maybe what they're trying to do with their big announcements is to scare others off from investing, right? So if they make enough noise and go in, and maybe there is enough of a gap because plants were closed down during COVID, and that's why we've got these chip shortages. Maybe they can do it, but I mean, looking at their plan, they've only just sort of reached a point where their 10 nanometer chips are. I think they're making maybe more than they are of the
7.
Was it the 13 or 14 nanometer chips? They're saying they're about to move into doing 7 nanometer chips, and then they're talking sort of mid next year for 4 nanometer, and then mid 2023 down to 3 nanometer. And then going down from there. I mean, they talked for years about 10 nanometer, and now they're about 5 years behind. Suddenly they're going to accelerate. So how do they do that? Can they make acquisitions?
Well,
do they have the R&D capability to do it?
I'm gonna. You expect me to say something controversial? you know it's coming, right? But I think that where they're wrong, and it's going back to that fighting the last battle. They're still thinking in terms of that the nanometers is the important thing, and it's not the important thing. It really isn't. It's the designs that are the important thing. So you can have a crap design on a small number of nanometers, and it's still a crap design. And that's the problem that I think Intel's thinking is still that they're still thinking like they're the big company that leads the world in this stuff, and that I've worked for companies before which have had glorious pasts, and people in the company say, "Of course we will succeed because we are X." And our name matters. It doesn't. People forget that, And the other thing I'm just going to, before I turn my rant mode off here, is that for the last few days I've been looking at. I'll talk about it perhaps another time, but I've been looking at a nice laptop from a company that used to make really nice laptops, and it's an okay laptop, but it's a Windows 10 laptop with a i7 chip, and it just feels old-fashioned. It doesn't feel a little bit old-fashioned. It feels like the last generation. it's nice. I mean, I would actually recommend people who are in a particular space would buy this machine, but it feels old compared with my M1 MacBook Air. It just feels like it's possibly more than a generation behind, and that's where Intel are. That's got Intel's best consumer chip in it at the moment. It's an i7 processor. It's the best. And
I've got an i9 in this one, but
but my point is that
I get it.
It's they're fighting the last war. Intel are.
Well, let's see whether they can come back. But what I like to see is competition.
Absolutely.
I love to see them focusing on some what I would say are some pretty big, hairy, audacious goals. I mean the time frame just looks nuts, but let's see how it plays out. We have run out of time, Bill. There was more that we would have liked to have gone into, but we are out of time. A big thank you to our show partners: Vocus, Vodafone, Spark, Datacom, Palo Alto Networks, HP, Gorilla Technology, and Umbrella Connect. So a big thank you to them. Bill, where do people keep it up with what you're up to?
I have my own website, which is billbennett.co.nz, and you can tell just how busy I am with work by how much is going up. There's not a lot at the moment.
Right, you haven't had too much.
But that should change again. I'm on Twitter as billbennettnz, and that's about it at the moment.
That's great.
You can still find me in the newspaper, but I'm not writing much about tech there.
Oh, well, thanks for taking the time to come and share your opinions, which are always fantastic. So thank you, and always very well informed. So much appreciated, and thank you everyone for listening in. We will be back again on the next episode, and we will see you again next week. So catch you then. Thanks everyone.
Good.
New Zealand Tech Podcast, the voice of the tech community, proudly supported by Umbrella Connect.